Hi everybody, I'm here with Dinkar Jain, who is visiting our offices in Mumbai from California. Dinkar is a senior director at Uber Technologies based out of Silicon Valley. He lives in the Bay Area and we're really thrilled to have him here to share his wisdom and experiences in the field of artificial intelligence. So welcome to Reach ID, Dinkar. Dinkar, to start with, if you could just share a little bit about your educational background in your early years, please.
Sure. So I studied engineering in undergrad. I went to University of Michigan, and then I also went for an MBA at HBS. So those are the degrees I've officially held. But other than that, most of my learning has come on the job because so much of what is happening in AI today is happening inside industry. Universities are not leading the charge on AI development as much. So in order to get to where I am and learn what I have, a lot of my colleagues in many companies have had a big role to play.
Terrific. So there's someone who believes a lot in inside the classroom and self-learning, and we're here to learn a little bit about his research and his approach from him. Dinkar, if you could just walk us through your professional trajectory, where all have you worked at, and what's more importantly the current role you're doing, and more AI-centered work experiences.
So I started out as a software engineer at Amazon. Then I spent 6-7 years at BCG, which is a management consulting firm. And with that firm, I was stationed all over the world. So I was primarily based in the US, but I worked in Europe and Asia. And after that, I spent a lot of time, the last few years, in Silicon Valley, where I have worked with Google, Twitter, Meta, and now Uber. I've also served on advisory boards and boards of various startups and early stage companies, spanning biotech to cloud computing and this, that, and the other, because the applications of AI in many of these emerging domains are quite exciting. So yeah, that's a little bit about my professional career.
Wow, okay. So very comprehensive. You've seen a lot of the firms in the valley, bottom up, belly down. Could you share with us, since you've been in the sector for so many years now, how you've seen the sector evolve overall? Because we're talking about the future of work. So how did these companies think about the future when you were working in these organizations? What sort of changes did they see coming? And how did they adapt to what was coming while you were there?
Yeah, so let me share a perspective that is focused a little bit on AI. So as you know, these companies are some of the largest companies in the world, where billions of consumers are using their products every day. And as a result, these companies and their products capture some of the largest data sets in the world every day. And what machine learning essentially is it's a way to program a computer using data as opposed to explicit instructions. So instead of writing a program saying, if this, then do this, if x is less than 5, output good, if x is less than 5, greater than 5, output bad, right? Instead of writing a program that way, what essentially machine learning is you tell the machine, here's a big data set, please solve for x or solve for y, and the machine is supposed to figure out a lot with the programs that you write.
So you're not prescribing the code, the way we learned it in university so many years ago.
You want the machine to write the code itself, but the goal of the machine is to write the code in such a way that the outcomes match the data set that you've given it. Right? Now that makes data the most important ingredient.
So is the machine learning from the data you're providing?
Correct.
Okay.
And the machine is trying to solve for a certain goal based on the data that you provided it, and then write the code as a result of this, right? So as a result, data is the single biggest thing that helps you program a machine better. And these companies, because of billions of users, the advent of the iPhone and other things where the phone is essentially on every human person all the time, are sitting on some of the largest data repositories and reservoirs in the world. And so not surprisingly, the core business models of many of these companies revolve around search, maps, advertising, video recommendations, content recommendations, and so on. And so all of these kinds of tasks are being done essentially by a lot of ML and AI because these companies have enormous piles of data to use. Right? And so as I see the future of work evolving, if you remember back in the day, probably very few people will know this because of so much time has passed. But Twitter went through a period where for multiple years there was a big debate about whether Twitter should use AI to personalize the feed or whether it should be strictly reverse chronological. Right? That debate is gone because machine learning has clearly showed that its ability to recommend content is far superior to any logical construct that you could write. Right? So we are in a world where all of these companies have figured out that in order to do all of these tasks, security screening, content recommendations, search results, maps navigation, advertising personalization, etc. All of these tasks are really well done with the huge piles of data that they have. And as a result,
you think they saw that coming? You think
no,
they
no.
knew this was coming?
I think this evolved. Right?
This
AI is a very old field, by the way. I think the first perceptron that was built in the 50s or the 60s by the Department of Defense, right, in the US. It's just that as humanity, we never had the volume of data or compute to actually implement any such large-scale operation till recently. Till as a species we started generating these vast amounts of data as a result of the devices that we all carry. Right? So these companies have taken advantage of this. Remember, these companies were founded in times when, before the smartphone in many cases, right? Facebook was founded in 2006 and so on and so forth. So they have adapted very well to the fact that, AI research and the amount of data and compute that we've created as a species pushed the frontier of what was possible for these companies. And as a result of the frontier getting there, these companies really latched onto that opportunity.
Okay, so one is personalization in recommendations, in search engines, etc., and on buying websites, right? When you see on Amazon, it's e-commerce.
Yeah.
When you were working with Meta, how are they using data to strengthen their algorithm? What really goes on behind these algorithms?
Yeah, so basically you would know what the user is browsing, what they're clicking, what they're liking, what videos they're spending time watching, what content they're engaging with, who their friends are, what their friends are doing, and so on. And
all within the Meta universe?
Just within the Meta universe.
Okay, so they know what you're doing on WhatsApp, they know what you're doing.
No, forget about cross-app. Like even within just Insta and Facebook, they know all of this about who your graph is, what content they are finding enjoyable, and so on. And YouTube has a similar sort of setup. And you can use all of that data to basically say, okay, we think you like this. And
can Meta use Google's data?
No.
Are they sharing data across these firms?
No.
They're not sharing data. Okay.
Because the privacy policies of most of these firms lay out very clearly what the data will be used for, and that the data will not be shared with outsiders unless it's like a government rule or a legal requirement or something like that. So the data is very.
So now they know what I'm watching. They know who my friends are. They know where I'm traveling. How does the algorithm make sense of all this stuff, right? If I know where Dinkar is going to go and what he's consuming and what content is he watching, as a human mind, I'm not able to, build a very specific. Because we are so itinerant, right? We're here, today you're here in India, tomorrow you'll be back in the valley, day after you might be on vacation. How does the algorithm make sense of all this?
So that's a very good question. And actually underlying that question is the question of what is knowledge and what is intelligence, right? So let us say I return to the valley and tomorrow and I'm exhausted. The algorithm should probably not tell me to go for a tennis lesson in the morning. Right? Because they'll be like, okay, this person's just gotten off a 20-hour flight, there's no way he's going to show up for the tennis lesson. And most days I anyway have a very low probability of showing up for a tennis lesson. So now the algorithm doesn't put that together in a chain of reasoning. It doesn't say long flight equals tired equals sports.
It does not do that.
It does not do that. It does not have that reasoning construct the way we express it in language. Right? What it does is it figures out, because if you give it vast amounts of data, right, it figures out that people who like people who tended to travel tend to cancel their appointments the next day.
I see.
It's not unreasonable for Google Calendar to be able to figure that out. But on the calendar was a long flight, and the next day a bunch of cancels happened. That's all it knows. Right? That's all it. That's the pattern it figured out. and then it can generalize that pattern. So anytime you have a long engagement the previous day, it may ask you to review your calendar invitations for the following morning, and then people feel, oh my god, I'm being tracked. They really are watching me and all of that. But in the essence, what's happening inside the algorithm's brain, nobody really knows.
I see.
It's sort of detecting these patterns.
But it's data-driven patterns.
It's data-driven
It's
patterns.
not reasoning-driven.
It's not reasoning, and that's why these patterns can be very wrong.
Okay, I see.
And because the algorithm doesn't get it perfect, because it's just trying to distill the pattern, right?
I see.
And this is an important thing for people to understand, that it's not the case that artificial intelligence or machine learning is in a position to replace human reasoning or human thinking, because it doesn't actually reason. All it does is it picks up on all of these patterns and it stores them and it deploys them, and it's right a lot.
I see.
And that's all that's happening under the hood, right? So,
Okay.
like, you know, the old school Amazon, you bought this, you will also like that.
Yeah.
There's no reasoning attached to it. They're just seeing that as a statistic, as a statistic, correct, as a statistic in their data. And imagine you're able to draw many of those statistics across hundreds of different parameters flexibly.
Okay.
That's what's happening in all of these new age machine learning algorithms.
Okay.
So it's important to understand that the algorithm actually can't reason and so on.
I see.
And by the way, the other thing to understand is that the algorithm or the machine learning systems are essentially dead silicon.
Okay.
They're not alive.
Okay.
So once you feed all of this data into these systems, they learn the program, so as to speak, and then it's dead silicon. It's just a set of instructions sitting inside, you know, on a memory chip or in silicon. So it's not like like if it had to be adaptive and reasoning oriented and so on, it would need all of the horsepower of our brain, which these things don't actually have. They're actually quite reductionist.
Okay.
And in order for it to be reductionist, they will have to get a lot of things wrong. They have to rely on cheaper pattern recognition compared to the sophistication of our brain, and so on and so forth.
Okay. And is this being shared across firms? Like if Meta is working on making its data sets smarter, is there sort of like an open source, open AI movement going on where these organizations are now sharing data sets or what they've done with their data sets or intelligent data sets? Are they available, accessible to trade between organizations and individuals, or is it quite protectionist?
So let me describe a little bit how the community is working
Okay.
on these types of problems. So there's various actors in the community. You have universities, you have private companies, and within private companies you have research divisions and business divisions whose interest is to advance science and research, and divisions whose interest it is to create proprietary tech. And you have governments. So the way the community works is things that require fundamental breakthroughs are often codified and standardized as tasks or problems. And then they create standardized data sets for those. So, for example, if you scroll around the web, you'll find hundreds of data sets now sitting for video pattern recognition or image recognition.
So those are available.
So those are now open source.
Okay.
And then each person can go and develop a new ML system to try and beat
Using
the
that
task.
data set. Okay.
Right? So there's like these hundreds of, you could call them Turing tests, but not exactly. There's thousands of these tests available that are being curated by academics and other committed people in the open community. Not really open source, but open community. For the purpose of developing baseline thinking around ML advances.
Okay.
Otherwise you can't benchmark, right?
Sure. Okay.
And so that's one facet. Then you have a lot of conferences and papers that are being written. Like Google Brain, for example, publishes a lot of papers. Facebook AI publishes a lot of papers and so on.
Okay.
And these papers are a way for people to exchange intellectual information, right? But they're not revealing company data or company trade secrets. They're describing algorithms and systems and how they were effective or not effective in certain tasks. And then you have companies that are just working with large private data sets in a highly proprietary way.
Okay. So you have all three.
So you have a mix of all of it.
Okay.
But the other thing to point out is that the field is moving so fast. It's unreal, right? Like in academy and in the academy and in research, you never find fields that move this fast.
Okay.
Like you go to an ML conference, there's a paper being presented, there's citations in that paper. The average age of the citation is less than 6 months old.
Okay.
I mean, that is unheard of in the academy, right?
Okay, sure.
So you have a deep interest even if you're developing proprietary tech in a company, you have a deep interest to stay plugged in with what's going on, because the amount of innovation is so high that if you try and keep your own thing under the wraps, you will actually get left behind.
Sure.
Because the community would have moved forward in a particular way. So it's hard to.
Okay, so since the topic we're researching and we're writing on is the future of work, how does all this feed into the future of work, right? How does it feed into, and maybe we can divide it in terms of like organizations and consumers. So as an organization, how is the world of AI and ML impacting what you're going to do? And as a common man, as just a consumer, how does it feed it? So we take these two and you throw in a third if you like.
Yeah, sure. So if you think about, so AI is just another technology, right? It's a different type of wave of technology, but it's an important one. It could be at the same level. We've punctuated history by calling the Bronze Age the Iron Age and so on. It's not a misnomer to refer to this age that we're developing now as the age of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And civilizations that use AI better will win, just like civilizations that discovered iron first won, and so on. It's a very powerful technology. Right? That being said, what you have to understand is that all of these technological changes throughout our history have always shifted the boundary between what a human being should do and what a machine should do. Right? Books were handwritten till we got the printing press.
Mm-hmm.
Letters were sent in the mail till we got email. And whenever we got this new technological paradigm, what a human chose to do versus what they relied on a machine to do shifted.
Kept shifting, right?
And so this basically is the old theory of comparative advantage, and it applies to whether a human should do this task or a machine should do this task. If I ask your audience, please multiply pi with Euler's constant, they will probably whip out a calculator, right? And that's correct, because that actually is the better way to do that task. 100 years ago, that would not have been possible. So we always have shifts in technology that expand human productivity, and the way that happens is humans start relying on the machines for certain tasks that the machines are better at.
So you're saying it will shift the balance between human and machine?
It will shift what machines are actually good at.
Okay.
Because machines were limited by the explicit instruction programming paradigm. If X is greater than 5. Now that we know how to program machines with large amounts of data, and we have large amounts of data, machines have actually become a lot better at many other things, right? But not completely, because they don't still reason. They're not creative. Like, none of us have data on the future. Because data is a record of the past. And if all ML and AI is a machine program coded up with data or programmed with data, you can't possibly rely on a record of the past to invent the future, right? And so there are many limitations that machines have, and humans will continue to play a critical role in shepherding and using this technology to further our progress, as long as we have good intentions across the board.
But how can organizations use this? How are they using it?
So employees in different organizations have to ask the question, as they see AI tools improving, what kind of job do they want to do, right? And a job which is repetitive, which has a very objective answer of whether it was right or wrong, is likely to be done with AI systems in the future.
So for example?
Account reconciliation or supply chain optimization or whatever, like any hand task. Or in those fields where it's very clear whether you did it right or wrong. So
a binary task,
a relatively objective task to judge whether it's right or wrong. Because you can then tell the machine that this was a good one and this was a bad one, and this was a good one and this was a bad one. And the more such examples you give the machine can program. So you want tasks to be objectively correct or incorrect, or as close to that as possible. You want tasks for which generating a data set is not very expensive. And you want tasks that, ideally, because AI systems are prone to error, you want tasks where the risk of a small error are not that high. So that category of tasks will very clearly be done by AI systems in the future. And if you are a white-collar worker that sort of does those kinds of jobs, you should, as you're entering universities or building your careers, you should explore doing something that involves a higher level of cognitive ability than those kinds of tasks. That's very important. Right? Like even the legal profession, frankly, is falling into these kinds of categories today. So, because lawyers are using AI to generate a lot of contracts and things like that quite happily, right? So many professions will undergo this kind of transformation where a lot of the
You're saying because there's no human subjectivity to deciding. It's in the case of law, it's all basis past cases and past legalities, and therefore you're saying an AI system is able to help.
Yeah. Now, if you're arguing a novel case, AI will not help you.
Because there's no past precedent.
But if you're writing a usual contract between two parties, there is not really a lot of creativity. Like a law firm's partner will review the junior associate's work and very clearly check for 10 things and say whether it was right or wrong.
Sure.
Right? So whenever you get into that kind of a situation, there's no reason for humans to be doing that in the future.
So you gave us an example of legality, supply chain management.
Advertising.
Advertising. How would it impact advertising?
Advertising today is all digital.
Okay.
And you have hundreds of ads specialists who write ads and then they optimize ads by setting targeting parameters and this, that, and the other. The machine knows a lot better what the user is going to respond to and can generate the creative and target the ad. So their ROI for an AI-powered advertising engine will always exceed the ROI for manually written ads. So if you're going to go into the growth division of a startup, make sure your job is not user acquisition and running Facebook ads or Google AdWords. Your job should be about thinking more strategically about which segments to go after and why, based on your product value prop or something like that, which is not like tactically just running ads and setting some targeting parameters to get out of it, because that should all be automated. Right? Now, so that's the white collar worker sort of thing. By the way, blog writers, like all content creation in general, right? Like where the content is not that specialized. The regular news report on a sports beat where you're just reporting on a routine match in the sports section of a newspaper. There's no reason for creative flair or human ingenuity in that kind of reporting, right? So that will all be done automatically, and it's already being done this way. Now, when you look at how an organization needs to think, so this is white collar workers and the implications there. When you look at how an organization needs to think, as an organization you have to understand that your workforce is now a mixture of machines and humans. And you have to be able to provide leadership to both. Because if a lot of the work is being done by machines, and you stand up and you write a great memo to your staff, or you give a great speech to your employees about how they have to serve this customer promise, the machines don't understand that, right? So you have to not just influence your human employees, you have to influence your machine employees. And that is something that most CEOs are not equipped to do. Like, they don't even understand what I'm saying half the time when I tell them this. The other problem is that you have to teach your organization, the humans, to be able to work alongside the machine. Because they have to be able to take advantage of the machine's strengths and co-produce the result for the customer of the business. So that's called co-botting, right? Where the bot is your colleague. And we don't teach that either. Like, we teach in our universities teamwork with other students. We don't teach them teamwork with weird machine learning systems.
So we must start collaborating with
the machines, right? Okay. Because the machine is going to be good at something, bad at other stuff. So let's imagine you create a chatbot to handle customer service inquiries, and you're a customer service executive, right, at a very prestigious luxury brand. When do you decide to let the chatbot take control of an inbound inquiry? And where do you define to intervene? If you don't understand the chatbot and its tendencies, you're going to either over-intervene or under-intervene. And at any rate, you're not going to get the right result for the business, right? So that empathy, quote unquote, between humans and machines is very necessary, right? Otherwise, your organization will splinter. And this is not a new concept in some sense, because when we started to talk about data-driven business management and all of that a few years ago, there was a widespread understanding that our organization needs to be data literate. In today's world, your organization needs to be AI literate, especially if a lot of the work is going to be done by machine learning systems, right? And so these are some of the implications in the corporate sector. As consumers, we have to understand very quickly that a lot of our lives are actually being governed by algorithmic tendencies and algorithmic nudges. And whether or not we are even living our lives with free will and with a sense of purpose that's internal or intrinsic is a question that most people in the world don't ponder today. So whether we are just bundles of data that go around the world and we buy the thing that Amazon tells us to buy, we date the person that Tinder tells us to date, and so on and so forth, or whether we are truly free-willed people with intent, going about the world and making up our own judgments of what we need and how we should relate to people, that's a huge question. And most consumers are not aware how to grapple with this dichotomy.
When we talk to parents and reach out, we see this generation shift where the parents say, they don't listen to us anymore.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. They make their own decisions.
Yeah.
And what you're telling me is actually they're not really making their decisions. It's the algorithms and the apps that are making the decisions on their behalf.
I mean, like any yoga retreat or Ayurvedic retreat would tell you that what you eat is what your body becomes.
Sure.
The information diet of most kids today, most teenagers today, is determined by algorithms.
Sure.
What they read on Insta or Facebook or Google News or YouTube, whatever, like whatever content they're being recommended, is an algorithm is deciding what they eat for information today.
Sure.
And if that's happening, then what real free will does that person have?
Sure.
What identity does that person even have, right?
Sure.
So many people tell me that they will never give up their Spotify account because Spotify really knows them.
Right.
It knows their music taste. Come on, guys. Music is the most deeply emotional thing you can experience as a human being. You really want an app to treat all songs as bundles of data and treat human beings as bundles of data and figure out, oh, you bundle of data there, you see, you hear, listen to this bundle of data over here. Like, is it really just that?
Yeah.
Or is music something deeper than that?
Sure.
And I think 90% of our relationship with music globally now is algorithmic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a deeply
But
heartfelt human experience.
somewhere it works. Like I subscribe to this theory as well. I don't go anywhere without my Spotify account.
Right.
I've paid for premium.
Correct.
And I genuinely think that it's now begun to understand me.
Right.
Spotify and I have a relationship.
But if you
Knows
knew,
what I like.
if you knew it doesn't reason, and all it's doing is it's saying you are just like these other 20 people, and therefore you should listen to these other 30 songs, you'll feel like, ugh, that's not personal service at all.
Yeah.
Right? And so every one of us is being stereotyped as a pattern, and a pattern of the past.
Sure.
Right? And so these are prisons of the past, machine learning algorithms.
Got it.
Because they're coded up with data sets by definition, which are records of the past.
I see.
And therefore, they are telling you what you will like or not like or what you should listen to.
Okay, but whether we like it or not, it's here to stay.
It's here to stay. It's important. Yes.
The relationship in the office paradigm will shift to man with machine, not man versus machine.
Correct.
Now, given this upcoming scenario, I think in your books it's already upcoming, it's already here. How does one upskill? What should we do today as individuals, as parents, as teenagers, as young professionals? How do we equip ourselves for this new world that's coming up?
So you have to be very AI literate. So if you work alongside an AI system, make it your business to really understand its pros and cons, its strengths and weaknesses. If you're a leader of a company, understand which tasks are better done with AI. What is the technological paradigms, overall strengths and weaknesses, and where to deploy AI and where to not.
What does AI literacy mean? Like if you had to just simplify it and say, Vibha, from Monday I suggest you start doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What would those 3 or 5 things be? How does one develop AI literacy?
So let's say, so a lot of people understand that if they click on something on a news feed, they're likely to get that content again.
Sure.
That is 101 AI literacy.
Okay.
Where they have now developed a relationship with the machine that, oh, if I click on this, the machine will give this back to me.
Sure.
Right? People say Netflix has created profiles because they don't want recommendations to get mixed up.
Sure.
And I get yelled at whenever I end up using someone else's profile and watching something. They're like, oh, you're going to mess up my recommendation. So these are examples of AI literacy that are percolating into our lives. So let's say you're at a school and you're trying to plan you're the school counselor and you're trying to plan the child's development curriculum for grade 11, right? understand that yes, AI can help uncover a large number of things that you could not humanly think of. You could personalize the child's coaching and all of that. But also understand that AI will never be able to give that kind of personalized attention to find the special spark in the child, right? So, so you have to balance you have to balance the zest of being human with the practicality of AI is going to be really good at a lot of things. So for the Spotify example, if you're going for a regular workout, sure, just let Spotify give you some music that will help you do your workout. But if you're planning a special evening for your family where you're wanting them to reminisce, just hand curate the list. Don't let Spotify decide what you all listen to at that one moment, right? So know when to use, when do you want to outsource your life or your life decisions or your task to the machine, and know when to keep it in-house, non-algorithmic. I think is key.
In terms of upskilling, you essentially need to understand at least how the algorithms work and understand the implications of those on you as a consumer and as an employee.
And as a counselor, an educator, a boss, so on and so forth, all of it, right?
Okay.
Like imagine if, so there's an interesting case where a school teacher in Washington DC was fired because her AI system graded her performance as bad. There was a glitch in the data set where some teachers were cheating and she was not, and that's why she got fired. And none of the HR people in that school district knew why she was fired because they didn't know how to think about the algorithm.
Oh, I see.
And this school teacher was a great asset to that district, right? And so you don't want these kinds of situations happening. And if the HR department of the school district understood the limitations of the AI program, the kind of data inputs it actually takes in to make those firing decisions, they would have had a better view of this. Something very relevant actually in the education sector today is plagiarism review. So we have all these online tools where people submit assignments, and there's plagiarism review companies that are there. Now, the plagiarism review technology has traditionally been very simple. It's just comparing text between submissions of the same assignment and seeing whether you plagiarized or not. Now, a lot of people are worried that people will use ChatGPT and so on to write assignments. So these companies are under pressure, and they've produced more tools to say, we can now figure out whether you use ChatGPT. The truth is they really can't know for sure, because ChatGPT hasn't, nobody can figure out what is written by ChatGPT or not. And so imagine if only 5 students out of 5,000 were put under suspicion of cheating, how it would affect their careers or their image in the minds of their teachers, right? So we can't go on relying on these AI technologies in a lackadaisical way. We have to be very careful to build that relationship, especially when we deploy AI in decisions of consequence. It's not good enough to be 99.9% accurate in many cases.
Okay, so the good news from what I'm hearing you say is the human being is not being thrown out of the equation.
No.
Everything you're saying is your approach sounds very balanced. You're giving me the importance and prominence of machines now and the importance of data, but at the same time you're juxtaposing it with the importance of human intelligence. And the collaboration essentially between man and machine is what I'm taking away from what you're saying.
And it's being redefined, but it's still a collaboration. And remember, technology always exists to serve the human purpose, never the other way around.
Okay, but now with this landscape completely shaping up, if not in the next 5, 10 or 15 years, it looks like it's bound to change. What should governments be thinking about? What should larger corporations be thinking about? What should we all be doing to equip ourselves with the world we are about to encounter?
It's very specific to individual governments or individual setups, but let's take India for an example, right? We have a large body of workers that work in contact centers, that work in coding jobs in companies, outsourcing companies like Infosys, etc., right? Many of these jobs, code is going to be written by AI. GitHub Copilot has demonstrated enormous productivity gains, and that's only going to get better. Contact centers, customer service, there's a lot of chatbots that are going to automate much of that kind of customer service. So the volume of those jobs may shrink considerably. A country like India should have a reskilling plan. It should have a plan for figuring out where do those millions of jobs And these are people in their 30s. They're not ready to retire, right?
Sure.
So where do those employees go next?
Okay.
And how do they get upskilled, right? We don't have a plan for that as far as I know in India.
Okay.
Another example is a country like India is generating, because of its population and its digitization level, probably the largest amount of data in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But we are not getting, we've always talked as Indians about the demographic dividend. We've never talked about or thought about how our country approaches the data dividend
Sure.
that our population is generating and how we should further use that for economic progress. So that would be a setup.
And do you think the government should have a role in determining?
Governments should always have a role. Now, how big the role is,
Sure.
how much the collaboration is with the private sector, how much of it is a global partnership, all of these things are important questions
So
to
the
address.
reskilling component,
Yeah.
the data component.
Yeah.
What about the legal component? How much of this is happening in the West? Are there legal frameworks and laws around AI and the usage of data, or are we still thinking this is a relatively nascent?
The legal field is very critical. So
They're critical of AI.
no, they're
Oh, it's
critical
important.
to AI's success
Critical.
because it's such an important fundamental technology. If we don't have the right legal frameworks around it, we're going to have companies and users lose mutual trust, right? And if they lose mutual trust about, hey, they will never respect my privacy, I can't sue them in a court of law, or God knows what they'll do with my healthcare data, or this, that, and the other, then the premise that you can program a machine with large amounts of data breaks down.
Sure.
Because the data is never going to be shared freely. So you need to create, and by the way, this is something we can borrow from the finance world, right? 100 years ago, for those of us who are familiar with the history of capitalism, there was this phrase of putting money under your mattress.
Sure.
And the reason why people felt comfortable putting money in the stock market or buying bonds with it and so on is because it became apparent that that's a very good way to
And
govern
money is
money.
safe
And
outside of your
and you had to
house.
create the right legal frameworks, the securities laws, banking laws, and this that, to make sure that investors were not going to get cheated, right? Same thing with data. If data is one of the biggest assets we have today as a species, what's the governance on it? So that that asset can be allowed to breathe and allowed to contribute into its fullest potential. Countries that figure out that legal framework are going to win. Companies headquartered in those countries with a good legal framework are going to have more trust and more confidence from consumers all over the world. If Gmail or some such fundamental communication product was built by a company in a dictatorship, maybe two big dictatorships that we all know of, where we don't trust the rule of law, do you think we would use it?
Sure.
No. We have big social media companies that are banned from India today because of that mistrust about data use.
Sure.
So if you create the right legal framework for data to be used for human good, you will end up enabling your companies to set up for success on a global stage.
Sure.
And no country, the EU is nowhere close to doing this, the US is nowhere close to doing this, India is nowhere close to doing this. No country or legal system has taken the lead and said, yep, we'll figure this out and we will be the destination for AI companies to start because we'll give such kind of a legal promise that is otherwise unheard of anywhere else in the world, right? I mean, there's a lot of innovation
currently
possible.
the legal frameworks don't exist.
No.
And you're not seeing anything happening in the very near future.
No, nowhere. Like the biggest issues in political campaigns in India, the EU, or the US
Are not AI related.
are not technology or AI related, unfortunately. So it's not in the voters' minds, therefore it's not in the government's minds. And many politics of many countries and continents are just lost in other affairs.
Okay. And there's a lot of optimism about AI, and you clearly seem to be like someone who's in the optimist, pragmatic. So I had to sum up this interview. But then there are a lot of skeptics, right? With every new technology and every advancement, people are worried. There's a lot of backlash. Say, oh, AI is going to take away jobs. What's going to happen to the blue collar worker, etc. So, how are you seeing this? How would you counter an argument saying, well, we're not really excited about AI because it's going to take away our daily bread? And do you see that as a reality, or you don't see that as a reality?
No, that's what I said about the comparative advantage. That the full job won't be taken away, but those humans will become far more productive if they use the technology well. The one thing to keep in mind is there is, I don't know what the stats are now, but billions of people living in poverty around the world. Billions of people without access to good health care, without access to their children having primary school education, this, that, and the other, right? Around the world.
Sure.
What are the things that are most important to fixing that? It's a doctor, it's a teacher. These are human services.
So healthcare, education
Right.
for the masses.
For the masses. How do you deliver that today? You have, the better the doctor, the more expensive the fees.
Sure.
The better the teacher, the more expensive the fees, right?
Dependency on human experts.
Yes,
isn't it?
yes, exactly. You rent services and time from a human being
Sure.
to improve your standard of living.
Sure.
With AI, basically,
And the higher your standard of living, the better.
the better off
expert
you
can
are,
be.
and there's a lot of inequality in the world
Sure.
on these two axes.
Sure.
Imagine a world where I could deliver the best primary school education for zero marginal cost with an AI-powered app. A world where I could deliver 90% of healthcare outcomes, in terms of diagnoses at least, at zero marginal cost with AI-powered apps, right? That would materially game change the standard of living, the quality of life of billions of people around the world. And they will then become fully functional artists and workers and people who are spending money to grow the GDP of the global economy and all of that. So we have a chance here, guys, of really taking the planet forward. Because if you take the marginal cost of like when book production went to zero, Wikipedia became free, knowledge became accessible to everybody.
Sure.
You can do that now for many human services, whether it's seniors who need to move around, whether it's people who need math and science skills, whether it's people who need to be taught how to code, whether it's people who need a simple diagnosis for some simple issues in their skin or eye or something superficial. Like you can do all of that today,
Sure.
and in the near future with this technology. So this technology is going to have a global economic impact and a global socio-economic impact.
Sure.
I believe bigger than the internet, the computer, and the printing press combined. Because for the first time, it's actually making the marginal cost of delivering human judgments of certain varieties free.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that is something that humanity has never.
Okay, so
benefited
you're
from.
definitely in the opportunities camp and not in the threat camp here.
No, there are threats,
Okay.
but the opportunities, like we've learned how to program silicon with data sets,
Sure.
and the silicon can now do things that it never could do before for us, in our control. And I mean, that is a huge bonus for us as a species.
Sure. Okay. As we reach the end of this interview, if you were to identify, certain jobs that don't exist today, can you sort of think through any sector and maybe just name for us, like, hey guys, today this job doesn't exist, but if you're planning for the future, you're planning for the future of your career, your child's career, think about these jobs. They may or may not exist 15 years from now, but if you had to give it your best shot guess.
So when AI systems, I'm going to give you some examples of fun ones,
Yeah.
not necessarily the ones that are the biggest category,
Sure.
but AI systems will talk to each other and make mistakes.
Sure.
The insurance industry doesn't have a clue how to deal with it.
Okay.
So how you deal with liability, lawsuits, insurance claims, payouts will require AI savviness to figure out, like, okay, when the Tesla crashed into the Lucid, what broke down where,
Sure.
and who should pay, and how much should who pay,
Sure.
right? Like that kind of thing will require algorithmic investigations and this, that, and the
Sure.
other, right?
So the evidence will completely change, and
the kind of investigation you need to
Sure.
conduct will change, and all of
Sure.
that, right?
So detectives, a new kind of
Insurance,
FBI training
or insurance claims
Insurance
adjusters,
training,
or
sure.
liability management overall as a category
is going to change.
is going to be
Great example.
completely different. In police departments and the FBI, since you were talking about them, the CBI in India, whatever, like you'd have law enforcement jobs that have to be AI savvy.
Sure.
Because if you get a call from a deep fake that is pretending to be someone and scamming you out of money, they have to be able to attack
Sure.
and capture these criminals red-handed, but in a completely different world.
Sure.
So handling cybercrime, deep fakes and so on will be a very interesting one. There is going to be a very big issue for us in terms of freedom of speech, because the cost of generating information, including fake information, is also going to zero with AI. And the foundations of free societies rest on people believing truths. And how the society chooses to regulate truths is going to be a very difficult debate in most societies, because we're used to having totally free speech. So I don't know where that nets out, but having legal, philosophical careers around the subject of, in a world of deepfakes, what is truth and what is freedom of expression? We have to figure this out.
And who owns the copyright to any of these things?
Exactly. So I think
the AI is not owned by anyone, is my understanding.
Correct. The data sets are public, and
the data sets are public.
And but they are owned by large fragments of people. But it's not even that, right? It's like, if you have a nefarious actor using deep fakes, how do you control information flow in a free society? So the philosophers usually feel they're out of a job, but I think I'm creating one for them. Which is they should think about the philosophy of what is freedom and what is truth, and what does it mean to have freedom of expression in a world where bots are able to express things.
How do you see the field of art evolving with this virtual art coming through, and people doing mock-offs of Rembrandt, and Mona Lisa suddenly getting digitized? Where do you see this field evolving, and is there going to be a market for digital art?
So art is a little bit of a sadder story in the bulk of it. Like, if you look at leisure as a sector today globally, we've trained people that in your vacation, you should follow the top 10 list of TripAdvisor and take these 20 selfies and post them, and that's your vacation. We've essentially made vacations into to-do lists for people, right? And made them norms. So a lot of art is going to go that way. Where Spotify, the artist's objective is going to be to figure out how to rank higher on Spotify. And they're going to have to figure out how to make these algorithmic channels respond to their work and hack them, if you will, as opposed to just producing good art and getting famous with serendipity, right? Now, but those kinds of tasks, I believe and I hope, will be for the relatively high volume, low sophistication art. I really do hope that there's still space for people discovering art, sort of naked, without algorithms lacing and making introductions and lubricating the interaction. Right?
Because I think it will become prescriptive again. It will be the AI telling the artist what chords to use, so that you can rank higher in Spotify. Right? And the artist that will destroy art in some ways. And it'll change what the artist thinks is success in some other ways. But it's also important for the artist to retain their integrity and figure out a way around it. And that increasingly will get difficult as more and more people are hooked onto these algorithms and their recommendations. So the field of art will have some very interesting changes. So hot jobs coming up in legal sector,
in philosophy, in, of course, in engineering and product, etc. That's obvious. In government, policy making, you name it. When you have such a big upheaval, everything changes, right? And to manage change is a deeply human endeavor. Parenting itself will become very difficult. Teaching a classroom will become very difficult. So many jobs will change for sure.
Okay, great. Let's see what the future has to hold. But I think Dinkar Jain has been generous and kind enough with us to share his vision of the future. Dinkar, I like your vision of the future. It's optimistic, it's thrifty, it's action-oriented, and really excited to see what the future holds for all of us guys. But thank you, Dinkar Jain. This was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.